We're very excited today to have Meredith Clark here. And Meredith literally wrote the book or dissertation on Black Twitter and is an authority on how African Americans have used social media and quite a bit of humor to address white privilege, patriarchy, and demand that Black voices be heard. Now, while her work on Black Twitter is important, what I think is equally remarkable about Meredith is the way in which she uses Black Twitter to show us how online forums can amplify previously marginalized voices and foster offline social change. Now, she brings her experience as a reporter, an editor, and a member of the editorial board at publications like the North Raleigh News and the Tallahassee Democrat to bear on her analysis of social media. And as a professor of digital and print media at the University of North Texas, she continues to engage diverse communities on and offline. So please help me welcome to the stage Meredith Clark.
I just want to say thank you so much to the women of the Clayman Center for everything that you have done in having the vision to put together this conference. I know that it takes hours on hours of work and planning and coordinating with other groups to make something like this happen. And thank you so much to everyone who has taken the time out to come and attend. We've come from a lot of different places, all have very busy schedules, but it has been so reaffirming to get together with such dynamic women and discuss so many causes that are close to my heart and the work that I do as a professional. I am so excited to sit here today and to talk about my dissertation, in effect, the thing that you think will never go beyond your advisor and the 4 other people who have to read it. I want to tell you a little bit about how I got to this work, and it's actually a point of advice. If you are going to pursue graduate education and you think you might want a PhD, always go into the process with a backup idea. I came into this study after my first dissertation was poo-pooed by my advisor. I'd written half of my proposal, and we got to one of the readings, and she looked at it and said, "I can't lead you forward on this." And one of my mentors had told me before I entered the program to always have a second idea. Well, in August 2010, I was still working as an editorial board member and a columnist at the Tallahassee Democrat, the newspaper in the capital city of Florida. And I saw a story that was published online at Slate magazine by Farad Manjoo, who writes about technology. And the headline caught my eye. It said, "How Black People Use Twitter." I didn't know that we used it any differently than anyone else. And so I went on to read the article, and what Farad Manjoo had stumbled upon were some of the quote-unquote Black tags that Black people across the country and throughout the world were using to have conversations that were seemingly joking all the time, that were about very lighthearted topics, and that didn't have anything to do with what was being talked about that day. So these trends, like "you ain't hitting it right," were popping up alongside news items, the bombings or actually the attack on a hotel in India and the earthquake in Haiti. And he wondered how these hashtags had risen to the top. And I thought it was a pretty good research question. I thought the headline was terrible as an editor. I thought the writing wasn't necessarily very well versed in the interactions of the people that he was talking about, and he'd interviewed just 2 very elite Twitter users to come up with these conclusions. And so I thought to myself that would make an excellent research project, and so I kept it on the back burner, worked on it in a couple classes, and when my advisor said that this isn't going to work, dissertation number 1, I reached in my pocket and pulled out dissertation number 2. And from this work came information about Black Twitter. And it was just coincidence that last summer, the summer of 2013, happened to be a great summer for Black Twitter. June, July, and August, Black Twitter shut down the interwebs. We took Paula Deen to church. We stopped a book contract that would have allowed someone to profit off of another family's pain. And we brought to the forefront the divide between women of color and white feminists when we talk about feminism. So what I wanted to do here today is talk a little bit about the work, but also provide some tools for using Twitter. When we sat in my talkback group, we talked about how it can be overwhelming if you don't necessarily know the rules. And we talked about who makes the rules and how you use it, how you slow down the flow of information to engage with other communities. And so the first thing I like to talk about is recognizing the signal. This is what Farhad Manjoo saw but did not necessarily tap into when he talked about Black Twitter. There's a series of what my colleague Scott Brennan calls hidden transcripts that are being used when these individuals interact with one another. Our messages might be linked to episodes of The Cosby Show that we watched in our youth, or things that our parents did as part of their parenting style. The signal in Twitter's noise is those hidden transcripts. It's our common cultural experiences that give us a language that we can speak to one another in and have very private conversations in public. So when we approach Twitter and we try to connect with different communities, we're looking for the signal amidst all the noise. Some of Black Twitter signals that I recognized: culturally resonant phrases, hidden transcripts, and of course the banal. That's going on every day, the tweets that you see about people's lunch, about how someone's Spanx doesn't quite fit right today, how someone's feeling good because they have on a jazzy outfit. Those things have been overlooked by some who will criticize Twitter as being frivolous or unnecessary, a way of informing people or over-informing people about what we're doing in our everyday lives. But that conversation I found by talking to 36 individuals who use Twitter on a regular basis, and by regular I mean several hours a day, that's what builds bridges. That's what builds communities. It's that very basic connection every day that brings you into their lives and helps them relate to one another as people and not just avatars on the service. Within that Twitter signal, within even the conversation around the banal, individuals talked about microaggressions. They talked about everyday racism. Prezi's having fun with me. They talk about the affirming conversations that they have online. With Twitter, we've created safe spaces for people to talk about the experiences they had that they have not been able to talk about elsewhere. Those are the hashtag conversations like What I Wore, which was presented by Christine Fox, to tell people about what survivors of rape and sexual assault were wearing when they were assaulted. That was a space where women could talk about their experiences that they hadn't been able to share with people in their offline lives. We also have reaffirmation from the virtual to the physical. This is taking the Twitter conversations that we've had and sharing them with the individuals who may not use the service, or just talking to people in our offline lives about what's going on online. And in this way, we exponentially increase the conversation. We take it beyond the online boundaries and help people who are not necessarily in touch with our online communities join in the conversation. We bring back their remarks and we advance the conversation even further. In my study, I found that these conversation centers were built on 3 specific levels. Now, the first thing I want to ask you is about the level that each of us has in common, and think that maybe because you're not a heavy Twitter user, you don't have a certain degree of commonality in terms of a personal community. But let me ask, how many of you joined Twitter because someone you knew was already there? Just about everyone. Okay, so if you have access to a piece of paper and a pen or whatever you use to take notes with, I'd like you to take down a couple of words to describe your own personal community. Personal communities were discussed by Gruds and Wellman and Antony in their work on Twitter and how we create community for ourselves in this online space. Think about the roles that you play in the individuals that you interact with on a regular basis in the offline world. For instance, I am a Delta. I am a churchgoer. I am a journalist. There are individuals in each of those spaces of my life that I'm connected with on Twitter. They make up my personal community. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to write down who might be in your personal community, maybe some of the theme words that define your personal community. Second, in creating those centers of conversation are thematic nodes. We are actually a living, breathing thematic node today. We're all here united under a cause of feminism, and online feminism in particular. Thematic nodes are those conversation topics that people return to again and again. You may notice that women like Feminista Jones talk about topics like sex positivity and body image. They talk about feminism and street harassment. Those are some of the thematic nodes that Feminista belongs to. Thematic nodes that I talk about include ethics and journalism, journalism education, multimedia pedagogy. I do a lot of talking about my existence as a woman of color. I talk a lot about hair. I talk a lot about the food I eat. Those are my thematic nodes. Those nodes link you to individuals from other personal communities whom you otherwise may not meet or interact with. When you see the retweets from people and decide to follow someone, you're creating a thematic node. If there is a topic of conversation that interests you and someone who says something that is profound and you favorite that tweet, that is a way of expanding a thematic node. What most people have recognized as being Black Twitter is actually personal communities and thematic nodes joining together in a meta-network that is activated by a specific cause. As of late, we've been looking at causes that surround police brutality, the existence of women and trying to create a safe space for ourselves both online and offline. Some of the conversation centers and thematic nodes were able to join together last summer, as I mentioned, and they galvanized behind a current event, in this case, Paula Deen and her own deposition about the racist actions that she allowed to take place and the racist comments that she made in her workspace. The thematic nodes and personal communities, they are joined together to form a meta-network to make the hashtag Paula's Best Dishes trend as a way of speaking back to Paula Deen and these allegations of racism. Obviously, they had very real-world implications for Ms. Deen, just making her way back to the public eye. As I mentioned earlier, they also had implications for juror B37. What we saw is not so many individuals, but a group of people who were united by their role in the case, their interest in the case, the common experiences they had with Trayvon Martin and his family, who came together and used the hashtag JurorB37 and also retweeted and shared a link to a petition in order to shut down the book. It's a meta-network in action. National Moment of Silence 14 is another example of the meta-network in action. How was Feminista Jones able to create a hashtag and in 4 days organize individuals in more than 100 cities to hold a vigil all at the same time? It's because individuals in each of those communities connected with their personal communities online and with the thematic nodes of individuals that they talk to on a regular basis to galvanize, organize, and take time to say that this is a cause that we think is important. We will use this hashtag to organize and to communicate to legacy media structures that we are tired of police brutality, and here's an action that we are willing to take around it. Another example of the meta-network that we're watching unfold right now is what's unfolding in Ferguson. By sharing images, retweeting those images, and creating hashtags like If They Gun Me Down, we're watching personal communities and thematic nodes who are concerned about the roles that police officers play in communities of color come together and change the national narrative about policing our communities. So then as we lead up to our hackathon this afternoon, the question that we want to address in considering the different levels of connection that we have via Twitter is how do we extend this connection online and offline to advance feminist causes? Design thinking says that we consider a few questions. We first determine desirability for these connections. We then test feasibility. How do we go about making this something that actually works? How do we create offline engagement? And then we build in viability. Now, those of you who are familiar with IDEO and what they do here know that this is a little bit of a spin off of what they talk about when they talk about design thinking. But I wanted to approach it this way because I wanted to issue a challenge on building in sustainability when we talk about online movements. Now is the time for us to identify our personal communities and the thematic nodes that we belong to think about how we train others to continue this work, how we use it strategically to advance the causes that we're interested in, and how we use it to build coalitions to speak back to those in power. This is a time for us to connect across so many different diverse communities, and I hope that during the hackathon, we can think about these questions and the circles that we belong to and find some common links. Twitter is a powerful tool, and in interacting with simply 36 people, I was able to find how we can strategically use this tool to communicate with wider audiences and to build on our online momentum offline. I hope that this has been useful to you. I look forward to hearing your comments, and I welcome your questions. Thank you.
So my name's Antoinette, and one of the things that I took from what you talked about Black Twitter is that Black Twitter really allows sort of a widespread community of Black people to get together to express their opinions and thoughts without an immediate threat of violence. They get to congregate in a way virtually that is not physically always possible, right? And so how have you, or if you have been doing a lot of this research on Black Twitter, have you been able to compare that to the ways in which Black people congregate in real life, in meet space, as we call it? Have you been able to see how those interactions are different and how collective groups of Black folks express their opinions with each other?
I draw mostly on the interview data that I took from my participants and asked them about comparing it to their real-world experiences. And I say real-world, it's a term I'm trying to avoid because what happens online is as real as what happens offline. So their physical world experiences, a lot of I call them consultants, told me about the safe space that they had online and being able to connect in ways that they couldn't in the physical world simply because there was no one around to connect with. I talked to several people who were in rural areas who just did not have another Black person or another Black queer woman or another man who identified as gay to talk to. And so they were compensating for the lack of access in their physical world. And it was kind of hard to make a comparison between the meetings that we would normally have if we had multiple people to talk to and the ones that we would have because we were able to converse at a certain time, around a certain show, around a certain hashtag. It's definitely an area of interest of mine. I'm interested in the back channels that we're now using to communicate with one another now that we know we're out there, what happens when we decide to move offline and meet. But it's something that takes further inquiry.
My question, and I want to ask it seriously, and I hope I can convey it. Twitter, in the hands of Black community, to me, looks like a very powerful medium. I know that upcoming presidential elections are going to cost $10 billion being showered among different media companies to reach out constituency. Black media companies are not here with us in the power that used to be. Listening to you, listening to the very precise, very interesting organization of how Twitter is used, I am compelled to acknowledge and ask the question, isn't there just a one more step from the conclusion and knowledge, wisdom that you have to erection of the new medium that can utilize Twitter to combine African American as a very powerful new medium, which can then create also financial wealth that otherwise is going to go toward other establishment media companies? Is there a thought worth holding?
Absolutely, and it's something that is actually happening. There are so many creators, content creators, that have been unified via Twitter and made aware of what others are doing because of Twitter. When you think about names like Issa Rae and Elon James White, people who are already online, who are making alternative media to what we have, who are taking up crowdsourced funding, who are finding backing within the community that we otherwise would not get without the exposure that we have on Twitter, that is the intervening step. And it is happening. It's gathering momentum, but it takes time. And one thing that those creators are up against is the fact that even though we have new mediums that are introduced, or new media that are introduced as time goes on, none of the old ones actually go away. When television was introduced, radio didn't go away. When iReaders came along, print media didn't go away. And so we're looking at the fracturing of money as it's spent and trying to capture a little bit of what's being spent with online. So it's a new niche that we're carving out. It takes the participation of individuals who use it. It takes that commitment to funding. And it's something that we have to work out how we are going to fund it sustainably. Are we going to take corporate sponsorships to make sure that we can compete with the big boys? Or are we going to continue to exist on the level that we have now because we are limiting our funding to those individuals who are willing to pay for it? So it's a brave new world in terms of niche media and I guess that form of the black press, the online black press.
Hi, thank you so much, Meredith. I really value your work. I'm wondering what the feminist movement or feminist movements could learn from the hashtag If They Gun Me Down campaign.
Mm-hmm. I think we can learn two things in particular. One, that there is a strategic way to go about drawing attention to your cause that will shift the gatekeeping function of legacy media gatekeepers to the individuals who want to redefine the narrative and do it in an online space. That's one thing that we saw happen with If They Gun Me Down. We saw this hashtag on Twitter, and then we saw it on Instagram, and the next thing you know, we see it on the front page of the New York Times' website. So it's possible in organizing people around a specific cause and keeping it going that we can tip that function. The other thing is in identifying the levels of community and connection that will make that process possible, and talking to people who have a similar state of mind and making sure that at a certain time they are paying attention and are able to participate, because it takes those numbers. One of the reasons that Black Twitter is so successful in forwarding hashtags and in making sure they trend is by sheer numbers alone. But the numbers depend on the connection that we have. And so I think that particularly for the groups that are assembled here and represented here, if we found a way even today to say that on a particular day, at a certain time, we are going to tell the individuals that we're connected to online to tweet with this hashtag and to use this image because we are going to draw attention to one of the initiatives that we learned about at this conference, we would see that we're able to replicate those same effects. The media is watching, the legacy media is watching, they're paying attention, and they're now taking cues from people online to figure out how to cover what we're interested in, what to cover, and it's a powerful tool for us to have, and it can be replicated.
You finished on a tone of kind of talking about sustainability. Could you kind of expand on that? You just talked about the fact that the reason that things kind of go viral is because of sheer numbers. Are there other best practices for what works and doesn't work with respect to particular campaigns? And then also, I mean, this relates to like Beyonce and her, I shouldn't call it a brand of feminism, her feminism, and Nicki Minaj and Miley Cyrus, and it's almost like they're making it, they're commoditizing it, mm-hmm. right? The brand of feminism. And the reason I worry about sustainability is because once you make something cool, it becomes a trend, and that trend can be seasonal. Mm-hmm. So this relates back to my question about sustainability and what's the best practice for us kind of moving forward as we go into this hackathon.
from today, what are we going to take and how are we going to use it in our online practices to advance the conversation that we've had here? I can agree that commodification is a risk, and it's one of those norms my table talked about that we navigate when a hashtag has become popular. How do we use it without offending the creator and the contributors? But how do we build on the momentum that's behind it? And we do that by negotiating the boundaries of permission. We do it by acknowledging the creators at the time. We do that by involving the people who were on the ground in terms of making those things trend.
Do you think there can be a danger of it being driven in a way that works against the Black community? Is there any monitoring of that? This movement, so that it's not hijacked by, either politicians or people who want to push a particular agenda, rather than the grassroots who are connected to the issues on the ground?
That is not going to happen because there are too many hellraisers who will not accept anyone swooping in and taking the conversation and trying to make it into their own. They are just, that's kind of the risk and the reward of having so many voices and having a platform in which everyone is a publisher and everyone is a speaker. People have tried. They have tried. Brands have tried and failed miserably, and they have been tweeted about for days on end. But I do think that because Twitter is as democratic a platform as it is, to the extent that if your account is public, everyone can see what you tweet, it kind of keeps there from being one leader or one person who can come in and say that this is the direction that this movement is going to head in. Because instantly, hundreds of thousands of people can speak back and say, actually, no, it's not.
Hello, great work. One thing that struck me is when you spelled it out, you said, have everyone in this meta network plan that on this day and time they're going to tweet under this hashtag, that the concept of occluded labor, which a lot of people were discussing when Beyonce dropped her latest album, that she did all of this work without it appearing to be work, right? That I think a lot of people, and that's sort of the mystery and magic behind viral, unquote, is that all of the labor and the work and the organization and the leaders that go into making something suddenly become viral are hidden. And when the people I work with who have been, under some axis of oppression told, no, things will just happen for you, don't plan, it's really hard to say, plan ahead. They feel bad, like they're doing a wrong thing to say, everybody on Thursday at 4 p.m. do this thing. Do you have any thoughts about fighting back against that message or how to spread the word? I mean, other than your dissertation, which shows it. So, yes.
Not really. I think that it's a process of trial and error, because certainly if we all decided to tweet at 6 o'clock tonight and didn't talk to anyone else, it would fail miserably. But if we talk to people in different places and kind of set it up so that at certain times people picked up the conversation, we could keep it going, then that works. There's nothing wrong with having a strategy for your online outreach. In fact, everything that can be right about that is, if you want to target people, if you want them to be a part of the conversation, if you want the conversation to be visible to others, it does take a little bit of planning. It does take commitment from individuals who are going to participate in that conversation. And the relationships that are already there will fire, people will pick up on it, they will participate if they decide to select into it. But there is nothing, we're an online world. We are socially connected. The trust that we have built in with one another should be something that we invoke and we pull into the online communication that we have in terms of advancing those messages. I think now is the time that we start recognizing that spontaneity is great and it's awesome when it takes place. But if we want our causes to be as effective as they can be, we do have to incorporate some kind of plan as part of our strategy for dealing with each other socially.
So I'm not a Twitter user currently, a Twitterer. What would your advice be if I'm going to go sign up this evening to
I'm so glad you asked. Okay. I recommend looking up the topics that you're interested in, looking up the people who are talking about them in ways that you're interested in hearing and learning more about, and then looking up the opposition as well to see what they're talking about and what language they're using, because you start to find coded meanings in the things that you hear offline just by following these people online. But once you have established your own Twitter presence, and by that I just mean once you've created your Twitter handle, you ask a few people, and we're in a room of friendly folks, ask a few people what their handles are, and ask them who they follow, and check out who they retweet and whose tweets they favorite, and go and follow those people's timelines for a while and see what they're talking about. That is the way that I found most of the people that I follow. That's the way actually the call for my research got out, just because other people retweeted it and people saw it and followed it and started talking to me. Twitter is a great place to be able to explore because you can lurk and no one knows that you're there. And you can read someone's timeline if it's public and not say a word. And often there are a lot of people who want you to do just that. That's a great way to learn about a community that you're not part of. If someone has a public account, log on, check out what they're saying, check out what the people who are interacting with them are saying, look at those retweets, Google a couple of things that they've said, authors that they talk about, articles that they mention, and expand from there.
Thank you.